Good morning, bonjour, welcome to the channel. My name is Kubeir. For everybody who is fasting, Ramadan Mubarak. I have with me today a very prominent immigration lawyer who has made a name for himself in several immigration-related litigations in terms of admissibility hearings, misrepresentations, refugees. And today we're going to pick his brain with regards to what's happening with these international students that we are hearing about who have presumably be given deportation orders because apparently the horse hasn't heard about them. So let me first bring Raj Sharma on. Hi Raj, welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kubeir.
No, thank you for sparing the time. I really appreciate this. So this thing about the deportation, I'm sure you've heard about it. I'm sure you've recently appeared in Red FM Calgary as well. And similar questions were asked. Similar things is what we're going to talk about today. First of all, is it really 700 international students who have been given these deportation orders already?
We don't know. We don't know if it's 700. It could be more. It could be less. When this first started, this started about 2012 and afterwards is when this sort of started. And obviously I interact with CBSA a lot. I used to be an immigration officer here in Calgary. And when these investigations started, this was some years ago. So at that time, the number was 1,200. Now, out of 1,200, just simple back of the envelope math, 700 is entirely plausible that it would be Indian nationals. And out of those Indian nationals, it's entirely possible that Punjab and Haryana are going to be up there. So it's a plausible number, but it hasn't been independently verified. So if you look at Nicholas Kung of the Toronto Star or an informed media, other than the Indian media seems to have stuck with the 700. If it's 700 done by one agent out of Jalandhar at around 20 to 35 lakhs per, obviously he's done quite well for himself.
Well, I mean, that was the first question that struck me. I mean, how can one consultant, or I wouldn't even want to use the word consultant because that basically brings it back on me. So one agent out there has 700 kind of approvals, and that too in the year 2018, 2019. By law of averages, we know there is no successful formula for study visas. So in order for that agent to get 700 approvals, that agent should have filed at least 1,400. Given the law of averages.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's one name that pops up, and in fact, that name I've also dealt with. So, and it's not 2018, 2019, these inadmissibility, CBSA ke haath lambe hote hain. But the wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind fine. You'll find that this number this has been going on since about 2014, 2015. So there's an investigator called James Whitaker. He's put together this sort of admissibility package. And so this is going on. So some of these students are at the tail end of immigration. So whoever's protesting, they may already have removal orders. They may already have gone through that process. Some have even become permanent residents. Some have even married and have Canadian-born children and are getting deported right now. In fact, my client is getting deported next month. So this process, if we're talking about 700, I would say 700 spread over the last 6-7 years.
Okay. So this number apparently then seems to be distorted, that all 700 have got a deportation order one fine day as of right now. So that's probably distorted. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. So this first started with the University of Waterloo. So one of my clients who I actually ended up winning at the admissibility hearing is from Haryana, had like a subpar IELTS exam, arts background, came to Canada on a letter of admission indicating that he was admitted to the Masters of Chemical Engineering to the University of Waterloo, which is one of the premier universities in North America. I've been to the University of Alberta. I've been to Osgoode Hall for my master's degree. I would imagine that it would be difficult for me to get admission into the University of Waterloo. And so Waterloo was the beginning. All of a sudden, we have an uptick of approvals from Waterloo. You can imagine why you would want a University of Waterloo admission letter. An officer is going to look at it and probably approve it because it's a premier institution, post-secondary institution. And so that's where it started from. It started from Waterloo. And then, of course, it seeped into all of these other colleges that Punjabi international students in particular seem to like, these small colleges in and around Brampton. So that was the starting point, was Waterloo. And then, of course, it went from there. So, CBSA and these applicants, these ghost consultants, obviously this individual in Jalandhar wasn't a registered consultant. Why would you register when you can make this much money with no license?
I absolutely agree. I mean, imagine that kind of money in India, right? But again, why do we keep coming back to India? I mean, sometimes it sort of, I don't like that, but I mean, it is what it is, right? Is that only because the number of international students coming out of India are such in huge numbers, and that's why, and the international students coming out of Punjab are in such big numbers? Is that why we keep coming back to India?
That's part of it. That's part of it. If you look at hundreds of thousands of international students in Canada right now, let's say 800,000. Last year, you're looking at India as being the top source country at 400,000. It's more than that. So, I teach at the University of Calgary. I teach immigration law there. I teach at Queen's University, and I show them this. This is the annotated IRPA. And if you look at the cases are right at the front, and you'll be surprised that a lot of these names are Punjabi. Now, they're Punjabi and they're Tamil.
Okay.
And why is that? So part of it is that Punjabis, and I'm very proud to be from that region as well. Part of it is the reason is that Punjabis tend to push the envelope. Okay, you're simply not going to see a Tamil or someone from Bangalore who's going to keep pushing. And when you push, you tend to succeed as well. So this is two sides of the same coin. This is obviously our desire to immigrate, our desire to better our circumstances, to do better for ourselves and our family, and to achieve something. At the same time, sometimes that leads to cutting corners. And so I would say that it's part of our greatness, but it's also one of our weaknesses as well. And this is, there's a reason why Chandigarh visa office was shut down. We can have another segment just on that. It's a positive and a negative.
Didn't they sort of conduct a survey sometime back to see how many people actually used ghost consultants or unlicensed or unauthorized consultants? And apparently the survey said more than 90% of people actually used those kind of agents and consultants there. So you can imagine, because also what brings me to this understanding is that if there are 700 as per the media, 1200 based on what you've been discussing, suddenly one fine day, the agent in Jalandhar couldn't have filed so many fraud applications, right? He must have come to this number gradually. Like, for example, he filed 1, he got away with it. Then he filed 5, then he got away with it. Then he filed 10, then he got away with it. And that's when the numbers basically went up, right? I mean, he couldn't have done it one fine day and said, okay, let me put in 1,000 applications.
And again, that is a sort of aspect of our Punjabi culture as well. Like, if you succeed on 10, let's do 1,000. I mean, like, if this guy sort of spread it out, he might have been able to keep this going for a while. Now, what had happened, 4 students pulled this move, okay? And so this is how it came to the attention of the authorities. These students were coming and landing in Ontario, and the scheme was this: we'll come as students, we don't want to study, we're going to flip it to an LMIA work permit.
Okay.
There was a janitorial company in Edmonton. There was a consultant in Edmonton, a registered consultant. Students come straight from Ontario, straight to Edmonton, don't even attend, don't even go to that school in Ontario. They all tried to flip that to a work permit, all 4 of them. They're all living together, in fact. And then that janitorial company became under investigation. Those 4 bachare actually ended up facing criminal charges under IRPA.
Bachare?
4. Look, I'm a criminal. I'm a defense lawyer. I'm a litigator. I always have a certain degree of sympathy for my clients. The fragility of the human condition. These are young kids. These are young kids that were just probably following, like, they have an inordinate amount of trust for these agents, and they get some sort of advice and they run with it. They got 4 months in jail, criminal convictions for misrepresentation under IRPA. So remember, when we say part of this story is that they're innocent, that they're bekasur, that they're shocked. I'm shocked to see that my University of Waterloo admission in Masters of Chemical Engineering is fake. right? The media portrayal so far is that they're pole, to use a Punjabi word, right? That they're innocent. Now, in immigration, as you likely know, the standard of proof to establish misrepresentation is broadly worded, but the standard is balance of probabilities, 50 plus 1, 51%. Raj, 51%, does he know what he's talking about? Does he does it? That's the standard. To secure a conviction under the Criminal Code of Canada and the IRPA criminal provisions, you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That means a prosecutor was able to show that there's no doubt whatsoever that these documents were fake, and they knew it was fake. So there's only a couple of possibilities. Number one is that they're truly innocent pole dupes, right? They've been taken advantage of. B 25 35 lakh they gave to some guy in Jalandhar, and they're innocent and they're shocked that their agent got them something. That's one possibility, I suppose. The other possibility is that they're willfully blind. Like, okay, we'll just rely on this guy. And this is that ostrich defense. You put your head in the sand, this, Jaan ke ande. There's that, willfully blind. Number three, they were complicit. This is what we're going to do. We're going to get to Canada. This is the scheme. This is the tarkeeb. This is how we're going to get to Canada. Once we get there, we'll flip to another school, or we'll flip to a work permit, or we'll do a refugee claim, or we'll get married. That's generally the scheme.
Yeah.
Right? That's generally the plan. And so these are the three sort of possibilities. Obviously, number two and number three are the much more likely possibilities.
Agree. But now, again, that brings me to the question. Who do you put the blame on for something of such magnitude? I mean, I'm sure this number 700 has come out of somewhere. And as they say, jahan dhua hai, wahan aag to hogi. So in the sense, like, there has to be some validity to it, some truth to it. Let's say not 700, at least 500 or 400.
I have no doubt in believing in the 700 number. And in fact, it could be higher. It just depends on the time frame that you want to look at. But in terms of the blame, there was a great article in the Walrus about this sort of international students. This is an industry, right, where the students are actually not the consumer. The students are the product. All right. And so we have even registered, educational consultants, the schools, the immigration policies that allow for them to get a postgrad work permit and become PRs, the push factors from Punjab, particularly, the pull factors. So, students are one part of this ecosystem. You have agents that are pushing this nonstop. You have colleges that are pushing this nonstop because the international students are subsidizing everything else. You've got immigration policies in Canada as opposed to Australia, New Zealand, UK, which expressly allow for the progression to permanent residency. So, if it's the blame, I would say there's lots of blame to go around. But at the end of the day, the applicant is responsible for due diligence. The applicant's responsible for choosing their agent. The applicant is responsible for the contents of their application. The applicant is, responsible for knowing the particulars of the immigration process. And they're going to be held responsible. And they're the ones ultimately that are going to be deported.
I want to share with you this clip.
So there is nothing in your knowledge so far regarding the deportation of 700.
We have not yet confirmed that, in fact, there are deportation notices to 700 students. That's correct. We need to go and dig into this report to understand whether it's true and the extent to which students may have been impacted.
So there is nothing in your knowledge.
I mean,
so far
again, this
regarding the deportation of 700
puts me in a bit of a question as to how can you really think Sean Fraser is not aware of what's going on?
Well, to be fair to Sean, he's the wrong minister. He's IRCC, right?
Yes. But wouldn't he? I mean, yes, he is IRCC, but doesn't this come under the larger purview of how did this happen in the first place?
Removal orders are CBSA largely, more or less. CBSA is responsible. CBSA can answer those questions. The investigation was a CBSA investigator, James Whitaker. The hearings officers are CBSA. I mean, but yeah, of course. I mean, as you well know, IRCC is one of the most studied and statistics-driven department in Canada. So of course the numbers will be there. Again, 700 is a number that has more or less been plucked. There's no independent verification of 700. It could be more, it could be less. But bear in mind, Sean Fraser has a lot of other things on his mind right now, including hundreds of thousands of backlogs, including revamping our immigration systems and border issues with the US. So 700 students that have come here on false documents is probably not very high on his priority list or his daily briefing.
Why wouldn't that be? Because again, let's take it back to the roots.
It's a fraction of a fraction.
No, I understand. I get that it's a fraction of a fraction amongst 600,000 international students, just 700 going through whatever. No. My point is, if we go to the root of it, the first application was made to IRCC, right? In that application contained a document which is obviously a fraudulent document. Now, I know New Delhi Visa Office has a very good, strong, and very well-resourced anti-fraud prevention unit. All right. Now, this fraud prevention unit, and now apparently they are using some extremely good technology as well to identify different kind of documentation and different kind of, all kinds of things are happening there. But this is again some years back, and even then the fraud prevention unit was in existence and knew about a lot of these things that are happening. So as part of an application assessment, do they not verify at all if the document that is being provided, especially the acceptance letter, is genuine or not? Especially if you're saying that this has been happening since 2012, 2014.
It's entirely possible that that kind of money may well give you access within the consulate itself.
Oh, okay. Now that is something that crossed my mind, but I didn't want to sort of say that. But so that's the reason why I'm saying
that's the reason why Chandigarh was shut down, right? And again, they don't publicize this. They don't publicize when they shut a visa office down, but and usually it happens with locally engaged staff. But that is one possibility. The other possibility is just volume. I mean, there's Hanlon's razor. Hanlon's razor is never ascribed to malice, that which can be explained by incompetence. You have pure volume here. An officer there's a lot of pressure on the temporary, the TR unit, the temporary resident unit of Delhi. And so you've got massive pressure to move these things out. An officer looks at a University of Waterloo transcript. If immigration verified every single document, our system would grind to a halt. This is why misrepresentation is construed broadly. It's construed broadly because we're trusting that the applicant will provide the relevant information. And there has to be a degree of trust, because otherwise, if you verify everything, it is going to shut down. We can verify IELTS. Those guys can now verify Indian income tax returns as well, which is amazing. Yeah. There's a massive amount of verification. Now, you're right. How did so many slip through? One possibility is, do they have access? That's happened before. I'm not saying anything controversial. I used to be an officer. These things happen. If you think it doesn't happen, then that's a Pollyanna-ish view of reality.
Yeah.
But in terms of, can these students put the blame on the officers? Like, oh, okay, my fraud wasn't detected. You guys let me in, and therefore I should benefit from that, or therefore that's some sort of excuse or a shield. I don't.
No. I'm absolutely not trying to shift the blame and saying that let the students go because the blame is IRCC. Not at all. I mean, you've said that before, that as a taxpayer in this country and being a citizen, the government owes it to us to run a tight unit, which is, as you said, integrity should be very high, and you should be able to trust the system that nobody can get away with it.
The sad part is that this means that there's going to be more verification, more scrutiny of Indian nationals. So now what you're going to see is that the bona fide student with the 6.5, 7.0 IELTS score, who's first class standing from Punjabi University, that person is going to be refused because of these concerns being raised, because that this is a hotbed of fraud or false documents.
Okay, all right. Let's put that aside for a minute. Let's talk about, so what happens to these students? Do they have any shot at it at all, or it's close and shut for them?
Yeah, there is a shot, and in fact, I've won these sort of cases before. So the step one. So let's talk about the various profiles. Someone comes in as a student, tries to flip to another college, does so successfully, graduates, postgrad work permit, applies for a PNP, gets even PR.
Yeah.
If they find after they're a permanent resident, then the process is that there'll be a Section 44 report alleging misrepresentation. You entered on a false document. That report is referred. Sometimes it's not referred. It's get a lawyer quickly, someone who knows what they're doing so that you can maybe ask the officer, don't refer it.
Yeah.
If the report is referred to the immigration division, there's a admissibility hearing. The minister has to prove the case. The minister will present a package. So far, it's been James Whitaker who's been leading up this investigation. There'll be a letter from and a statutory declaration from the university or the institution indicating that this person never attended, this person never had admission. That hearing, there may be testimony, there may not be testimony. Then there's going to be a removal order or not a removal order. I was able to succeed here. You can present the innocent misrepresentation defense here.
Okay.
If they're a permanent resident, they can appeal that to the Immigration Appeal Division and argue that there's sufficient humanitarian and compassionate grounds for them to remain in Canada.
Okay.
So that's one possibility.
So for all these guys who are now saying that they were called in by CBSA,
most of them are not permanent residents. They're still international students, or they have work permits.
They don't have the IID, right?
They don't have the IID. Yeah.
And so they have been already been given exclusion orders. So if they already have an exclusion order, which primarily for people who don't understand is basically leave the country, deportation, right? What do they still have a chance? Will JR or a judicial review, for people who don't understand, would that get them any relief at all?
Judicial review is about a najaiz decision. It's about an unreasonable decision. It's about, like, is there any khamiyat? Is there any problem with the decision below?
Yeah.
Did they look at something they're not supposed to look at? Did they not look at something that they were supposed to look at? And so usually it's an open and shut case. Sometimes we can succeed where the minister makes a mistake, and that's what happened in one of my cases. Remember one thing, a lot of people think that marrying a Canadian or permanent resident will solve their problem. In Canada, spousal sponsorship does not overcome an exclusion order based on misrepresentation.
I agree with you, but I know some TikTokers who have been making these videos and saying, hey, get married to somebody and you'll be out of this. And
my client was married, had kids, is leaving next month because his consultant, this one that got suspended out in Quebec, actually quite, notorious, filed in Canada spousal sponsorship, assured him everything will be fine, but SCLP only covers off, non-compliance, let's say, removal orders emanating out of Section 41 of the Act, not, all of these other grounds. So they don't have a lot of options. I suppose a humanitarian and compassion application, but those Indian passports are valid for like 10 years. So by the time that H&C is assessed, they're gone.
And as a foreign national, though the charter sort of says everybody's equal, in such situation where there's such a strong misrepresentation, strong one, and obviously which can be proved without a doubt, at least I don't think there is much happening there. But a lot of them are consulting. I know there is a member of parliament who has been supporting them collectively. I know there's a lot of media sympathy with them. Does any of this help?
The media profile so far is at odds with the cases that we have. It's at odds with the criminal convictions that have been sought and obtained against them. So the media profile and these calls for sympathetic consideration are at odds with the actual facts. The actual facts are that they paid somewhere between 20 to 35 lakhs to a ghost consultant, that they've come to Canada using false documents, demonstrably false documents. They've signed off on these applications indicating that they reviewed everything and everything is true, complete, and correct. And once they come here, none of them attend the school that they got admission to, none of them. They don't attend, they don't visit. Very often they leave that province within 3 days of arrival. And then very quickly they either try to, adjust their status in a different way. So the media portrayal is quite a bit at odds with the fact patterns that CBSA is seeking. I'm not sure, media attention sometimes helps for individual cases. Media attention in this case, where you're indicating that there's been widespread fraud, widespread undermining of the integrity of the immigration system by one particular ethnic group or linguistic group, is, I think, not a great idea.
I agree with you, and I feel really, really sad that a lot of people, I mean, let's say if it's 700 people, it's not just 700 individuals, it's 700 families. I mean, if they're married, their wives, their children, their parents back home, and all the network that they've established. So yeah, it sucks what has happened, but I guess the law will prevail in what they do. Now, taking you away from this question, and let's talk about something totally, totally different. First things, I'm sure you read a lot of data, statistics, because part of what you do also involves understanding what that would be. In my opinion, I think at this point of time, there are more than 1.2 million temporary residents in Canada and counting. Add to that the number of Ukrainians under the CUAT who are coming in, then the people who obviously being given work permits, etc. That number will very soon cross 1.5 million temporary residents in Canada, against the annual immigration target for this year, 480, 465, 485, then going up to 500,000. This imbalance, where do you see this heading?
Perhaps an amnesty?
For 1.5 million people?
Amnesty could be broad or it could be limited. I mean, I remember I wrote an article, or I presented a paper to the CBA about the start of the IRB, and it's remarkable how, if you're in a particular industry long enough, what's old is new again.
It is.
So my father came to Canada in 1970, 1971. He was a lecturer at Punjabi University, and he came here. It was the point system at that time. Passed a language test. Still remembers the one word he got wrong. He didn't know the definition of sedan. Probably because he was only in a couple of cars before he came here. But, two of my uncles, their status was adjusted in 1973, 1974 under a waiver program at that time, a regularization program. So what happened is that there was no visa on Indian nationals at that time. So plane loads of, Punjabis were coming to Canada, and obviously the system couldn't handle it. A backlog was created, and an amnesty was sort of announced and promulgated and executed. There's been limited amnesties and waivers after that. People think that doesn't happen, but it has happened. It happened in the 80s as well. So there could be an amnesty, whether general or specific. There could be a lot of political blowback for something like that. But, at a certain point, the system simply cannot handle.
But the numbers are just too huge, and to think of an amnesty, wouldn't then that further encourage more people to get into Canada and then overstay illegally and sort of keep taking advantage of that?
Absolutely, all of those arguments are valid. All of them are valid. You have to, but how do you address that? This is not just us; it's the Americans as well. But at a certain point. Or you'll just have to expand regularization through the economic process. I mean, I've commented on this as well. Like, it's very, very unfortunate. Like, these students, we're not hitting, my clients are not hitting these CRS scores. And how can they? I mean, if they come to Canada after a +2 in India, and you get a 2-year diploma and you get like 1 year skilled work experience, even if it's skilled, I mean, what do you got? You're not hitting those points. And, a lot of my clients aren't hitting those 7s and 8s that you really need to supercharge those scores.
So is Sean Fraser's new tool, Bill C-19, and I know you know a little bit about it. I've been talking about it for the last, 8 months now, ever since it was first tabled in the parliament. But that tool independently gives the minister the authority to identify categories and then invite people within those categories based on their CRS scores. Now, do you think that amnesty tool, it won't be amnesty because people will still be on their merit based on their CRS score, Do you think that is the way forward that they are trying to go? But again, because the numbers are not adding up, the economic, as you very well know, is less than 300,000.
Yeah. I think, look, I think the situation is this. Again, what's old has become new again. So in the 70s and 80s, this ministry wasn't called Ministry, Citizenship and Immigration Canada, or Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship and, Canada. It was called the Department of Employment and Immigration.
Okay.
And that's, back then, immigration was directly tied into labor and the labor needs of Canada. And it was a far greater, use of, it looks like we're going down that path again. It looks like we're going down that path of, immigration as a tool to address whether demographics or labor. Specific occupations, yes. This, again, we're going back to what, 2010, 2011, that the designated occupations list around Kenny's time. I think that makes sense. I think that designated occupations or groups should be identified, and they should be prioritized, and they should be fast-tracked. That makes sense. Any country should do that. If we need truck drivers, okay, let's do a blitz of truck drivers for the next 6 months. All right, we need nurses, let's do a blitz of people already here.
Yeah,
and
no, absolutely sure.
Because you do that for overseas, they'll just, all of a sudden we'll have job letters from like Mansa that this person is, in a particular, health occupation or whatever.
Of course.
But I think what you really have to do is you have to expand, and you really have to prioritize individuals already in Canada that have studied here, that are working here. You have to prioritize that. I don't know where that leaves the FSWs. I'm sure people are not going to be happy with my comments, but I don't see how the numbers can work any other way. I think what you do is you put a freeze on FST, FSW perhaps, and you just concentrate on everyone that's here, and you might be able to work through them in a couple of years. And that's why, by the way, that's why Sean is extending the PGWP again, right? A Band-Aid solution.
It is a Band-Aid solution, and I'm not sure in the long run how it helps everybody collectively. I mean, it's great that the students have another opportunity to sort of regularize their status and obviously find some employment, hopefully get through a PNP. But by and large, the numbers, it's not adding up, and the number of spots available is not adding up. And
we welcomed over 1 million people last year, and so now you are now going to see some pushback from public opinion, because what's going to happen is that those house prices are just simply not going to come down. Those inflationary numbers are still going to be there. There could be a downward pressure on the labor market, on the prevailing wage rate. If some 45-year-old Canadian laborer or truck driver is competing against some 25-year-old Punjabi, he's not going to like it. He's not going to like it.
That's the problem that I've been trying to sort of figure my head around. Very recently, Sean Fraser, I mean, this was obviously when he was appointed as an immigration minister. As per his mandate letter, there was one aspect which included the fact that he should create more pathways within express entry for international students and foreign workers. And I'm sure Bill C-19 is progressing towards that. That obviously puts a lot of FSWs in a tight spot. But what, again, I'm not sure what's happening. I'm not sure if that is your area where you practice or you sort of are more familiar with. But IRCC is playing a start-stop game with express entry. They paused after the tier fiasco happened. Then they conducted 2 big draws, 5,500 each in January. Then again they went silent. Again, suddenly they woke up and they announced 2 new draws, again back-to-back, 7,000 each. And I'm understanding that, again, there is a bit of a technical glitch, because everybody who should have received an ITA hasn't received one yet, creating a lot of panic. This inconsistency puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people, whether they're inside Canada or outside Canada, because nobody has any faith on how the system is going to work anymore.
Yeah, there's certainly there's not a lot of certainty before. And again, let's talk about pre-2012. There's a pass-fail CEC.
Yeah.
6.0 and 1-year skilled work experience, and welcome to Canada. So I don't know. It may require some imaginative scenarios. That one perspective, perhaps create some sort of like secondary PR status, right? PR, but not quite PR, right? Maybe one level above work permits, maybe some sort of indeterminate status, and then permanent resident status after that, and then citizenship after that. Again, something that the UK has done. So maybe you go into some sort of indeterminate status that allows work and travel in Canada.
Would charter allow that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, like you're giving them a benefit. I mean, you'll just have to revamp eligibility, right? But I mean, I think it's not fair. I mean, the Kuwait, the Emirates, these Gulf states, they use laborers like Kleenex, use them and dispose them. I don't want to go down that path. I think that's morally wrong. I think someone that works here, that pays taxes here, should have access to social services, should have access to healthcare. Obviously, they're contributing to the system, and should have some sort of understanding that they have, more than just temporary foreign worker status in Canada. So if someone's been here for let's say 3 years working and paying taxes, I don't know, give them an open work permit, give them like a multi-entry visa, for the next 5 years, and then hopefully they can navigate the permanent resident labyrinth or maze in those years. Maybe that's what you do. And then that way you can take the pressure off these people trying to navigate these LMIAs, paying for LMIAs. Let's not go into there.
Let's not go that one. Let's not go down that route.
So I mean, I don't know. Maybe they give them indeterminate status. Someone's been working here for 2 years and paying taxes. Someone who's making more than 35 grand a year, give them indeterminate status.
Is it ambitious to expect and hope for another TR to PR kind of a program, sort of, have a blanket program? Because there are so many international students and foreign workers. Most of them have had the fag end of the COVID pandemic.
Kubeir, I've said this on the radio before, is like, I'm a pundit, but not a Joshi. And, the budget includes a TR to PR pathway. The budget itself included it. So I was predicting the use of the TR to PR pathway in the first quarter of this year. Obviously, I was wrong. But that seems, the problem with common sense is it's not that common. I was expecting the TR to PR pathway to make an appearance this year.
Okay. But then again, talking about Sean, he has indicated he does not see TR to PR the way it has happened come back into effect, but something more like Bill C-19, where they can choose specific categories and only bring them in.
Yeah, I don't see that either. And again, like the TR to PR pathway was reminiscent of the family class a couple of years ago, some sort of like Black Friday Walmart, door crasher sale. Like in 24 hours, we have the international students slots sort of filled. Yeah, I think that's a joke as well. I think it should be logical. Everyone should know the criteria well before. I mean, we had people with their IELTS that expired, and they're running around in the middle of a pandemic trying to get an IELTS done.
Yeah.
I mean, what about common sense? Why can't we extend IELTS score? How come IELTS expires in 2 years? One of my staff members is doing the IELTS for the third time, I think. She came as a student, then she applied for, PR. Now she's getting into like the University of Calgary or something. Like, what is this? Like, once you're in Canada and working or studying, those IELTS scores shouldn't expire.
They work for citizenship application. For some reason, they don't work for PR applications.
I don't know. I don't know what to say, Kubeir.
Well, I mean, I love chatting with you, Raj, and I'm sure we'll do this again. But before I let you go, any parting comments, especially of what's happening with the international students? I know they are really stressed out.
No, I mean, Kubeir, thank you so much for what you do. I think, getting the right advice out is very, very important. And I can't emphasize this enough. I know the nature, sometimes our nature militates against this, but applicants must do due diligence. You must know the requirements of your application. You must know the contents of your application. You must review any application that you sign or electronically sign. You must know and do some due diligence in terms of your representative. I don't think it's any excuse in 2023 to use a ghost consultant, someone that's not registered with the government of Canada, someone that's not a member of a provincial bar. Due diligence is very important because it might be easy now, but when you're facing deportation 8 years after entry to Canada, after your marriage, after 2 kids that are under 4, then you wish you would have done your due diligence, because you're at CBSA and inadmissibility and enforcement, this is a cat and mouse game. And so the first 100 people will get through, everything's fine, and they'll encourage their friends. They'll be like, yeah, this is how it's done. And then all of a sudden, CBSA will adapt. And then you'll see the next 300 people get deported. And I want people to understand, like, you have all these Facebook videos of agents handing out visas like mithai or whatever on these videos, but this is called survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is the person who survives, the person who succeeds talks, okay?
Yeah.
And the person who fails or gets deported,
The dead and gone.
he's quiet, all right?
Yeah.
So just hang tight and, do things properly, cross the T's, dot the I's, because this is no way to live with the sword of Damocles over your head this way for years and years and years.
Absolutely. I agree.
Thanks for having me on, Kubeir.
Raj, thank you. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Definitely we'll want to sort of have you back here again so we can chat this, because I love doing that. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, that was Raj Sharma. Great advice there. Dot your I's, cross your T's, because you never know what's going to happen around the corner if you haven't been diligent with your application. On that note, I have a small announcement to make, because we are launching our education students portal, because that is something which we've been wanting to do for a long time, but based on what has been happening, I guess it's about time. So what we're trying to do now is for international students who are applying for the first time below the age of 25, we have decided to absolutely go and offer them our services for a very, very nominal amount of $200 or $300. So that way you're dealing with a licensed consultant, you're dealing with the absolutely legit documentation. You will get your offer letters from the college. You will have the access to the college and the portal and everything that the document that have been submitted in your application. That way you do not have to pay any hefty fees. You do not have to fall into any fraudulent hands. And so watch out for that one. We will be launching it next week. And this has been great. Thank you so much for joining in. I shall catch you tomorrow for our weekly roundup. Stay tuned for that one. Take care, and I shall see you tomorrow.